over to Karabo, who will do some introductions of herself. So I won't give a long introduction, except to say that, often in this movement, when we think about what does it mean to build multi-generational movements, one of the things that I think, really value as the Climate Justice Coalition is the importance of youth and youth leadership. And when I look around the movement, I see lots of really beautiful, powerful, inspiring youth leadership. Karabo is an example of one of those people. So Karabo, over to you.
Amandla. Awethu. Sanwanan, Dumelang. Igama, Karabo. I'm not going to do like dramatic introduction. I come from Powershift Africa, so we're working across the continent on climate action, renewable energy. But I'm not a conventional environmental or climate change activist. What brought me into this space was frustration. The space was to save the earthy, save the animals-y for me, and I didn't understand the narratives that were being sold and what a Pan-African narrative looks like. So our organization focuses purely on Pan-Africanism. We work on the continent. Even the money we accept, we scrutinize that money. So we are very deliberate about that decolonial component when it comes to this conversation and what it really means. The conversation I'm here to really speak about focuses on neocolonialism, because we've moved from colonialism into neocolonialism, and I'll break down some of that terminology. But it comes from a report, and they've kindly linked it in the program. So Powershift wrote a report called the Just Transition Report. We call it the Red Report, so it's just easier. And in that report, we really break down everything related to what a just transition looks like for the African continent. I guess it comes from the frustration of being told what this just transition means for us by a lot of global north organizations, but really defining what this means for us on our own. Now, I've tried to make this conversation on decolonial and neocolonialism a bit more fun, because it can be very lecture-ish, because it's very theoretical. So we're going to have conversation, and we're going to really, and through that conversation, you'll see how this conversation on decolonization and neocolonialism comes through within our daily work. So we're going to do something I call the Just Transition Spectrum. And this spectrum, this is where now we're going to see if you guys can really agree, disagree, debate, and clash, and really listen to people. So in the spectrum, there's going to be a question, and there's only two sides. There's no neutral. You're either for something or against something. There's agree and disagree. If you agree, you stand. If you disagree, you remain sitting. And then we're going to have discussion as to why you agree and why you disagree. And within this, we're going to weave the conversation. And what is nice is we want to hear from the different perspectives. We have people who are in human settlement, people within the employability sector, people within the mining sector. This conversation means something for all of you, and it's important for us to hear from you and your different perspectives. Like they echoed, if you need to use a different language, please feel free to do so. But also it's important to listen to the other side. But also, even if you're the only one standing, be brave. Stand for something. Okay, so we're going to start with the first one. Like I said, there are two. If you agree, then you stand. If you disagree, you sit down. The first question is, foreign companies should not be allowed to extract minerals in Africa. Foreign companies should not be allowed to extract minerals in Africa. Okay, since a lot of people stood, we're gonna start with the people who are sitting down. I need a roving mic.
Let me assist you, just
Okay, let's start.
anyone.
Yeah. Let's start with the ones who are sitting. Those who disagree. Why do you disagree?
I disagree because extracting the minerals could mean employment to Africans.
Okay. Another disagree?
Okay, thank you very much. I think that what is important here is to understand the fact that extracting the minerals cannot always be wrong, but it should be done within the right legal framework or acceptable frameworks that consider other factors. So if it does happen within the context of renewable energy and that particular sensitivity, I don't see any problem. It is economical and it is wonderful. And if those foreign companies do adhere to the existing policies and the ones which will be developed, I don't see any problem with that one.
Thank you. Let me just add, if somebody says something and they've changed your mind, you're allowed to change your mind. So you're allowed to sit down or you're allowed to stand up.
Thank you, comrade facilitator. Yeah, I disagree because I think we need this international business to grow our country. And for me, really, to be honest with you, this is a sign of if you disagree, if you agree, this is a sign of xenophobia. Thank you.
Okay, so one more person from disagree, and then we're gonna move on to the agree. I hope you guys heard xenophobia.
Thank you. Thank you. I think the previous colleague was spot on. I think not saying that we should not allow foreign companies not to, I think if we stick to the policies and the rules and the guidance and stuff like that, I mean, it brings a lot of opportunities for the country economically, job creation. So I think we need to use that as our advantage, not the other way around. So that is my opinion why I disagree.
Thank you. And then we can move on to some of the agrees. If there are people who are like, yes, I want to really answer this. But my question to the disagrees is, can we not do it ourselves?
Okay, going there. Okay, so I'm going to start. Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to say why I agree that I shouldn't. If history told us, I mean, if we look at history and of extracting in towns like Ngababib and Oukip in the Northern Cape, what happened at Jagersfontein, all the devastation caused by the mines and no reparations. You look at the West and Europe, the good social systems, how well built their economies are, how poor Africa is, but we have all the minerals. We are so wealthy in minerals, but South Africa is the country with the highest gap between the rich and those that don't have. The most unequal country in the world. So what I'm saying is, and I wanted to come to a point, because development, because they say we're against development if we say no to oil and gas or fracking and all of that. They come here with highly mechanized machines. It doesn't create the jobs they promise it's going to create. It leaves so much devastation. And then you get ghost towns afterwards. Then they don't rehabilitate the land. And the communities and the generations to come sit with all the devastation and the impact of all that mining. So it is time that Africa, if we should mine for certain things, why don't we do it ourselves and make sure we create the jobs, we rehabilitate the land, we respect the laws of this country, and we make sure that the people benefit from the resources within their communities. Thank you.
Thank you. So obviously I'm also in agreement with the sentiment. I do want to take the proposition a bit further though. So I agree with the sentiment, but I don't agree entirely with the formulation. So absolutely I agree with the spirit of it. One, because of the painful colonial history and neo-colonial present of the way mining happens in a racist, extractive way. So those companies that we're talking about shouldn't invest. So I agree with the statement. But I think it has to go further, is that any company, any for-profit company, is driven by the same incentives of making a profit. That's a company that has to survive. So the question is, I think we need to go to, should for-profit companies at all be involved in mining? And I say no. I think the people of Africa should be mining, or the people of South America should be mining. That means publicly owned with also community and worker decision making, however one looks at it. But I think it's for-profit companies. Because if you had an African for-profit company, it might not be as big, it might, but still, just the way like Chinese companies behave the same fundamentally as European companies. If you are for-profit means, to make a profit means you literally get more than you put in. And the bigger profit you make, the better you do against your competitors, the more investors you get. And that means cutting environmental costs, it means cutting social expenditure. So as long as we have for-profit mining, I think so I would say companies should not be allowed to extract minerals in Africa. Minerals should be publicly owned and democratically controlled in the interests of the people. And in fact, not only in Africa, but everywhere. But I think the focus on Africa because we are the most exploited.
Okay, I'm gonna put a spanner. It's gonna change a bit. Even if local companies are unable to. So, foreign companies should not be allowed to extract minerals in Africa, even if local companies are unable to. And this could speak to capacity, lack of technology, lack of capital, could be any of those. Are you still standing? Still xenophobic.
George.
That's nice. Thank you so much. I still stand regardless of think that basically the extractive economy have proven to us that it can a lot from whereby we want to live well with what we have with our environment. Because the very same minerals that are being extracted, for who? Who benefits? Where are we left? So capitalism basically is not for us, because even the current system, and I'm worried about those people who are sitting down, which means I'm asking myself, but it's fine, it's their own view, because Songes Landline crying about the very same thing that these foreign companies are doing in our own land. So, yeah, that's it. The current system has failed us. You are looking for a regenerative economy where we live well with our environment. Thank you.
Siyabonga. Are you changing questions or must I continue?
Two more hands.
Yes.
Sanma, we'll give the disagree the final word.
All right.
Amandla.
Umkiza Sibongile Lona from KZN flood victims on the pure dwellers. Into khona ngale issue le. Ama companies lawa like Shell no engine bazicabangela bona ukuthi ba benefit. At some point thina la eKZN siwumphakathi wase KZN nje wakhele iTheku sisasenenkinga yama floods enzeke ngo2022. Ugovernment uselfish kanjani even now kunabantu abangakatholakali sisebhizinisi leyo case. feel that pain emine. Ngenze example ngama-mines eJohannesburg. Bangaka abantu abashonile laphaya and ama-families wabo awazange aza benefit. Siphinde sibuyele siye eMarikana. eMarikana, the one of the presidents wethu wase-South Africa ubene mine khona kwashona abantu. It's more than 12 years. U-Andries Kekana washawa wabulawa. By the end of the day wathi yena uyaxolisa. Just say sorry like ikati, even ikati mele ikulimalele kuba buhlungu ngoba ufuna ukwazi ireason yokuthi life. Same thing ephinde yenzeka la KZN ngo-2022. Asinayo imizi. Ngingomunye walabo okwaphuma mina kuphela. Kunabantu abagulayo kunamhlanje aba-asthmatic. Lama companies afike enze nje. Ake ngithi nginomhlaba uvulelekile. Especially thina si la KZN KwaZulu Natal umhlaba wethu u-rich. Si-rich kakhulu and I'm proud of this because even ngingakusasa ngikise ekhaya kamaphumulo ungafika uyibone lento. Into eyenzakalayo bafike bathi sizobeka i-power lana station sicela mhlawumbe imize ewu-10 or 20 imuve iye somewhere sizoyinika imali engaka. Bese kuthi laba ama-family asele sizothi every month siwanikeze imali. Guess what? Leyo nto yenzeka only 1 month. Abantu abasurvive akwenzeki lutho. Ngibuye ngize kwi-cyclone eyenzeke oThongathi naseWestbrook. eThongathi kune-power station enkulu yelekhuzana yeshuga khiqiza ushukela. Ngidlula khona mangigoduka. Laphayana mawuthi ubheka ismoke esiphuma uma ngabe umshini ugaya. Bonke laba bantu bayalimala yini intuthu ngoba i-affecta in amaphaphu. And uma ngabe i-climate ishintsha umkhathi lo angithi ungcolile ku-affecteka those people who are developing abangeyo nawo amathuba emisebenzi because kuzothiwa uma kuqashwa okay ngizocela uDani ngoba une-experience ka-5 years. Umntwana uzoyithatha experience ka-5 years ephuma e-tertiary. Yayibona leyo nto uthi uba-selfish akaye lapha e-engine ufuna umsebenzi okanye ka-Transnet kuthiwa i-learnership. By the end of the day seyenzile leyo learnership umntwana uthola ukuthi akaqasheki. Ngiphinde ngibuye ngizoza kumasipala wethu weTheku okuyiwona osilidayo. I-justice kusamele isebenze eThekwini njengoba sikhona. How come they coming i-magistrate court kube imango nyaka wesithathu izofuna ukudeclare abantu abalahleka ngo-April ka-2022 kuma-floods izoba declare manje. What about those people ama-family members asurvivayo afila nale pain and those people they didn't get a counseling. I got 2 pictures for the children who was affected abawelwa yindlu. And abazange bathole plastic surgery, abazange bathole counseling abantwana. Even ubaba wabo wabakwikhoma for 51 days. Feel that pain. Akekho nendaba nabo. So they must go to hell. Ngiyabonga.
Thank you. We'll leave this question there and move on to the next one. I know there were many hands. We'll try and balance to the next questions. But at the heart of this question, it really does explain the issues around neocolonialism. And when we speak about that, because for the longest time we've been talking about colonialism, that's been very direct in that they've come with the military, they've taken over. But now neocolonialism has to do with the indirect control that is happening. And they do it politically, and I think South Africa's perfect example was state capture. They do it economically with some of the entities that come through. There's a lot of control, and there's a colonialism that is happening that is not as direct as the first one. And we need to be aware of that as we speak about climate action, just transitions, companies coming here. But we also need to understand the balance between we need capital, we need investments, and the big question mark is where are those coming from? But we also need local development, we need local ownership. What does that look like? And if they're bringing a lot of their expertise and technologies, they obviously want to own a lot of these things. And sometimes our leaders, when they see the many zeros, they get dizzy and they sign off things, and a lot of then local communities are sacrificed. So it's important to think about neocolonialism and how it affects our daily interactions with these things, whether it's in the mining sector, whether it's in the labor sector. It's important to understand there's a control that is happening, and we need to be aware of it, even if it doesn't look like a military coming in and shooting us. It's happening. The second question: African countries should continue exploiting fossil fuels for economic development over advancing environmental sustainability. There's a big debate around fossil fuels and There's a big debate around fossil fuels and renewable energy. There's a lot of people who say, let's continue exploiting these things, because for the longest time, the rich nations have benefited from these resources. For example, Senegal last year discovered oil and gas, and they're like, we are going to exploit that because that is going to make us rich, and we are going to use that money to then eventually transition. So should we continue exploiting the coal that we have, the oil that we have, the gas that we have, or should we just focus on renewable energy? So, okay. Then there's no need to, since... Oh. I'm neutral.
Mina, I think if reason why I'm so me, then says I'm understand. I think my voice is loud. I'm ufuna ukucela ukuthi ngicela ungisimplify le question, because isingisi sibuye sibe sisihlule. So ngifuna ukuthi ungisimplify ngikhona ukuunderstand.
Let me attempt Zulu. Uthi umbuzo la eAfrika singaqhubeka nokuphehla ugesi ngamalahle ngegas or ngeoil. Mengabe kube uthi yebo uzoma, mengabe kube uthi cha uzohlala.
Okay, this is a... Yes? But it's a good thing. It means that our minds are moving in the same direction. Okay. The spanner.
Thank you, Mayor.
I'm struggling with exploiting. Maybe that's my struggle with the question, because when you say exploiting, like, yes, the government or whomever, the structures exploit. And then if it's us, the communities who are now using this resource, it's exploiting. So I'm conflicted.
So I think for this question, regardless of who it is, whether it's government, community, it's a...
Okay, nane kupa fela li add this gas extraction or gas drilling. I don't know what is the terminology there. Yeah, because in my area there in Velcom here, they've started with that, and I suspect that something terrible is going to come out of that gas extraction,
So where
gas
are you
exploitation.
standing?
I don't agree.
Okay. So
No agreeing.
Okay, we have a brave soldier over here.
here we go, Alex.
I think I'm going to lose my position in leadership here. So the reason I'm standing is the system we have, it just burns fossil fuels, it wastes them, it creates pollution, it creates harm. But fossil fuels can be valuable. Charcoal can be something that we use to filter water. And so if we use fossil fuels well, and we don't burn them, we don't just destroy these resources, that maybe is a positive use of them, but not the burning, the destruction, all of that. So that's, I don't know if that's a sit or stand, I'm halfway in between, but but let's not burn and waste all our mineral resources the way that we're being asked to do.
Still on standing, or you are giving those who are sitting hands?
Let's do
Standing.
one standing and then go to the back for the sitting. 3 more hands, then we move.
Molweni, Karabo Dineo, Wolfman. mina ngisukumele because I want to support i-statement sami lesibe ngisikhethile ekuqaleni kusho sesintombi. So ngizoyisupporta ngokuthi uningi lwethu have cars and some of us still want to buy cars. Sizithenga sizosebenzisa ntoni? I-gas, electricity. Akusiyinto ezokwenzeka like over kusasa. Kusazoqhubeka kuthathwe ilahle, you understand? So Chifundo, you don't want to have a car. You don't. Petunia, you want a car. John, you have a car and you're using petrol. And some of us have jewelry. Sisliyo, sifake amacici igolide. But sithi no. Kahle nje nathi sizazi. Yeah, I was supporting his statement some so ukuthi disagree like ekuqaleni but manje hey the brave.
Hayi unesibindi nyani.
All right, sanibonani yimi futhi seniyangazi Phethuni. Mina ngithi I agree. Because why? Angithi it's just transition into ehambayo eseza. It's not yet here. So in the meantime, we should continue. Because mina number one, I'm from a very not so privileged family. Ekhaya sibasilahle. So if mina ngithi African countries shouldn't continue exploiting ngoba kubhalwe njalo. Kungagujwa ilahle and then ekhaya siyobasangani siyopheka ngani. So mina I'm standing on I agree. Asiqhubekeni okwamanje sikwenze lokho yize sikwazi ukuthi ku wrong. I'm asthmatic ngesimanga sentuthu. But because kuyangibenefita in a good and also in a bad way. Everything has positive and negative effects. I agree.
Okay, just 2 more new hands for disagree. Yes.
For this
disagree. Yes. Oh, my name is Fana Ngibuya Sekunda Mpumalanga. Most of us sibuya eMpumalanga, especially in the area Highveld. Sinenkinga eningi. Nami nguye umuntu onenkinga yokuphefumula. Because it's nama mines, nama fine ash dams abangela bosasola. So sinama issues abangela ukufa ibeka kanjalo kusho ukuthi nathi sinenkinga is serious. But the reason I was sitting down on the first one is because lana asizange ukuzowa senze njengama politician uzokhuluma into endlulayo sikhuluma ireality. So manje basizosuka sikhuluma ukuthi no ngiyadisagree. But at the same time, ngiyazi ukuthi the same cell phone engiyiphethe idinga amalahle ukuze ukuthi ngicharge. Abanye abaningi la sibanda abantwana basema university, mangimbuza ukuthi wenza which course, uye Sasol. We are Eskom. So we have to understand the point ukuthi mangibuyela ku this one why ngihleli phansi this time is the effect ukuthi as long as basusa indaba ye renewable, then that's why ngithi no, that one I cannot stand for it. But I stand the first one because at the current moment we still need to support these things, but we must fight them as we continue to fight them. Kuti ba comply kuma message ngathi sasole kunama emissions comply ku. They have to make sure ukuthi they stand to that, and we are behind the case to fight those things. Thank you.
Zwane.
Comrades, mina feeling yami kulabantu la abathi bayavuma so far angizwa isombululo sabo, but I feel like they are justifying kule ukuthi we need ukuthi sivume okwamanje. So if we are saying that, which means we are saying asiqhubekeni sife, then the solution will come ngalesikhathi ezofika ngaso. Ubeni ukuthi ngabe sithi we put an end to this because we know ukuthi egcineni kuzothatha isikhathi kona, but if sibonisa ukuthi lento le asifuna ngempela sizoqhubeka silwe njalo ukuthi size sifinyelele la sifuna ukuba khona. One, if sithi maqhubeke ukuthi kulibele kugujwa phansi kukhishwa ama minerals lanka, one, we are not the resources. Abo Americans own those minerals here. And those minerals asuka la, then they go overseas, ayo process. Right now we are talking about our earrings. I feel bad at some point because this thing iphuma la ekhaya. So ihambe yayo process wangali. Then it comes now in a form of a profit for them to make a profit. So that is an issue. If we are not going to fight for that, then we are going nowhere. We'll be the crime based, but this is wrong. Then okay, but let us consume, but this is wrong actually. Then we need to come up with an alternative. What to do from here? So that we started that long period. But if we are relaxed, then it's going to take us forever. Not even but forever.
Thank you. So we're gonna end that one there. And I think that's really a good way to end it. A position needs to be taken. There's no sort of kind of, because even within the movement, there's no position. Then they call you guys those lobbies that were paid, that, you know, he likes throwing it around. There needs to be a position. But while we develop that position, it's important, I think this narratives and the different opinions show how people are thinking. We're not all thinking the same. Politicians are probably thinking the way that those who agreed are thinking. And it's important that you understand that at the end of the day, politicians are going to be the ones that are making the decisions. They are the ones that you guys are lobbying against and building movements against. It's important to tap into how it is that they are thinking. Bearing in mind, obviously, South Africa's history of corruption, self-interest, there's also that dynamic, and we need to start thinking about that. Okay. Renewable energy projects funded by foreign corporations are just as harmful as fossil fuel projects. If you agree, stand. If you disagree, sit. Renewable energy projects funded by foreign corporations are just as harmful as fossil fuel projects. Let's see, yeah.
Which one to?
Yeah, we're gonna start with two people who agree. Ideally, hands who also haven't spoken.
Okay, I'll
Yeah, let's start.
I know. I'll just because I.
Do you need clarification? I'm hearing translation in Zulu. Ke mopedi tui.
Because I'm Zulu. Yeah.
Actually, like the way you really have to change them.
No, I mean I think what you call issue. Okay, but I think the challenge is.
Baqali translation uqala.
Just translate. Okay, I trying to find ukuphehlwa kwamandla ngobusha. Okay, project imsebenzi ukuphehlwa kwamandla kabusha. Efakelwe imali noma enikezwe imali izinkampani zamanye amazwe inobungozi obufanayo nama projects ama fossil fuels aseningizimu Afrika or what you call. I think it's something like that. That's what it says. Unfortunately, we can't directly translate. But I wanted to make a point, but I don't want to speak. Is that the problem I have is that our questions, the way they are framed, is very dangerous. But I hope at some point we will be able to get into how we use particular words. I mean, in the last what you call question, we had exploit, and I wanted just to have a conversation on the exploits concept itself, because most of the issues we have are ideological, political questions rather than issues of a system, practical climate change issues. So we need to really be careful in how we frame questions, how we use words, because we may seem to be wanting to do something different by reinforcing the same ideas that we have a problem with.
The framing was very deliberate, because when those agreements come, when those conversations are had, these are the exact words that they use in the spaces. America recently in the Senate said we need to exploit resources from Africa. So it's important for us to really have these conversations with the exact same words and not have this language fly over us. Because these are the languages that we sit in, it's not so bad, but they mean something else. So while we put these up in that way, what are you guys thinking when you see these? Because when you get in the rooms, this is what they're presenting.
New hands, right?
Yes.
Greetings again, comrades. My name is Mihle Kayeza from SAYCCC. I disagree with the view in a sense that when we speak about climate justice, an element that I think that has been even discussed in a lot of COPs, and there is called climate finance, of which in a way of trying to bridge the gap of climate injustice, our global West is supposed to every year contribute a number of funds to organization and also towards renewable energy projects. I'm not sure about the amount. However, that has not been met in, I don't know of a particular year that has been met. And therefore, some of these fundings that come from Global West funds renewable energy projects. Therefore, I disagree with the statement because by this money that the Global West contributes to the Global South, which is African countries and the rest of disadvantaged countries, does assist in terms of moving forward with the renewable energy project and assisting in terms of moving us towards greener energy formulation. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. One more hand, and then we move on to the last two.
Yeah, Sanmuran Ambafana Shachwayo. Yeah, actually, my brother took some other ways that I wanted to say, because I was to say one of the key demands this year, since the COP29 is going to sit, it's about pushing for big corporate to finance as part of reparation. Comrade, I want to be controversial. Yes, we are NGOs and CPOs, but we must understand some of the funds that are coming in, that are supporting this particular movement, are coming from the very same big corporates. Whether you are tapping in from Rosa Luxemburg or whatsoever, but the very same big corporates are funding some of the struggle that we're in. Thanks.
Okay, I'm gonna. I know there's so many hands, and I know it's like
standing ones now, or still the sits.
The next question, cutting this one. It'll feed into your lunch, and me, I don't want in between you and your lunch. So basically, sorry. One of the things, let me just point. One of the things that we also, in the neocolonial conversations that we have, is green colonialism. Because we've always viewed colonialism in the context of the coal and the oil and the gas, but there's equally a concept called green colonialism, where we are seeing these entities come, extract what they need, or even use the African continent to develop this renewable energy projects. I want to give the Namibia example, and it's a perfect one, and Morocco. So there's these green hydrogen agreements that are being made, and one of the countries are not seeing is the terms around transmission lines and storage. So they've basically told us that we don't have storage capacity on the continent, and that storage is sitting in Europe. The transmission lines are taking all of that energy to Europe, and it's going to power Europe. But all of that energy is being extracted right here on this continent. So some of these things are developing in that way. Currently in Morocco, the transmission lines go to Europe, and nobody's saying anything about that. So we need to be careful as we transition and we want renewable energy. We need to question how it's actually being done. There are also lots of harmful practices and harmful things that are happening in the renewable energy space. Lots of land grabs are happening, lots of displacement is happening, lots of water scarcity is going to be happening, especially with things like green hydrogen. So we need to also scrutinize, because we don't want to get into another cycle of a different form of exploitation. Sorry. Okay, we're just gonna take one here. African nations should nationalize all mineral resources to prevent exploitation. African nations should nationalize all mineral resources to prevent exploitation. And I want to put the caveat of bearing in mind Zimbabwe. You have answered my question. So, I just want to speak about some of the things that this report speaks about. And I mean, there are slides, and Alex will share them with you. I don't want to go through the slides in like a lecture form, but some of the important things, and I'm hoping that you picked it up in the conversation. A position is needed, and we need to be very clear about that position. But that position has two faults, in that you need to take into consideration the local needs and what the local conversation and context means. But you can't forget the neocolonial dynamics, the power and the structures and the money and who's benefiting. You need to scrutinize a lot of these things. So who's benefiting? Where does this money come from? Follow the money. Exactly. So it's important to really understand power and structure, but also this means scrutinizing government and the decisions that are made and in whose interest these decisions are actually made. we can't view the conversation on just transitions as just, a communal conversation. That is ultimately going to define what just transitions look like, but it's important for us to take an extra step to understand and scrutinize the colonial dynamics because they're happening. And if we operate in isolation of that, your leaders are going to make decisions for you and then you're going to be surprised. Corporations are going to come into your community, you're going to be surprised. Investments and agreements are going to be signed and you're going to be surprised. And ultimately, you have to bear the brunt of the issues that exist. And we don't want to just... Was that an Amandla? Yeah. Amandla! Okay. We don't just want to speak about the things when they impact us. We want to speak about them as they're being made at a high level. And I can tell you, in a lot of these spaces, they don't like you guys. They don't like us in a sense of civil society, the movements. They try and ensure that you're not in the space. For example, Africa Energy Week is happening. And just the cost of that, they know that a lot of civil society organizations are nowhere going to be affording a $4,000 ticket. But those are the spaces we need to be in because a lot of investments are discussed in such spaces. So how do we then maneuver with that understanding? Another thing is the dependency that comes with neocolonialism. The idea is that Africa needs to be dependent on foreign countries, on countries from outside. So while there's been conversation around we need the investments, we need the capital, it's important that in however it is that we're getting the financing, it doesn't really create the same exploitative ways of financing that have been existed where we want them to save us. We want them to now create more debt. So are we putting ourselves in more debt? Because we're already in a debt crisis on the continent. And that's one of the things. We are unable to finance a lot of this stuff because a lot of our budgets are going into paying off debt. For example, every time our president comes back with new loan, I'm like, yeah. So those kinds of things, we're already in a debt crisis. How much more debt do we need? There's reparations. They've really harmed the continent. We need to view these conversations from a reparations point of view. It has to be defined, it's people-centered development. There's no other way. Otherwise, it's going to be 10 rich people deciding the fate of many communities on the continent. And I think South Africa's economy and structure is very interesting because it requires us to scrutinize a lot in that the wealth and the economic inequality is very imbalanced. So how do we ensure that we really move that? And I can see the land and the nationalizing conversation being very much, front forward, because the reality is that is definitely a form of liberation. That's how you liberate people. I was having a conversation with Bafana during the time that side, and he was saying that land is kind of everything. The water, the resources, all of it is there. And that was the basis upon which colonialism happened. And obviously there's a lot of damage there, but now there's still a control dynamic that, like I said, is not direct, but it's there and it's happening. One of the things that is important is we need also a shift in that Africa needs to have an assertive international role. We currently look like beggars. Every time we go into these spaces, it's like we are begging, especially in this conversation. We constantly look like we are begging. Even with the finance conversation, it looks like we are begging them to pay. It needs to shift. We need to have a more assertive role. And I think, obviously it has to do with all of the damage and the harm, but we need to change our mindsets in terms of how we view this conversation. In that, for example, renewable energy, we have the critical minerals, and these are the cobalts and all of the minerals that are going to facilitate this renewable energy and just transitions. They need us. In essence, they need the continent to facilitate this entire renewable energy and just transitions across the world. The African continent is the most favored when it comes to the climate, the coastlines. We have the resources, we have the climate to facilitate enough for ourselves and to give to the rest of the world. But if we get into rooms and we are begging, like, yo, please give us this, it's really, the dynamics and the structures and the powers just don't sit well within these spaces. We need to come in as assertive as possible to be like, we have all these resources, how can we make trade agreements better, that we do carbon taxes if need be. They're already taxing us for our own resources. So we really need assertive positions. And unfortunately, right now, Africa looks very much like beggars in all of these conversations. With that, the fundamental question really is, what does a decolonial, pan-African just transition look like for South Africa? But maybe, let me even take it down. What does it look like for you? Because it's so important not to define this beyond ourselves. It's important for us to understand, what does this mean? And I'll start with myself, and then one sentence with 10 words, not the long sentence with 50 words, the one with 10 words. For me, Karabo, a decolonial African just transition has feminist values to it, in that it considers the marginalized groups in this conversation. It considers how this conversation disproportionately affects women, youth, persons with disability, and any other marginalized identity, indigenous communities, and that's what a decolonial Pan-African just transition means for Karabo. What does it mean for you?
Yeah, that's. I have a question. Okay, for you. But I agree with what you said, and maybe leaving no one behind attached to that. But my question is, because you're saying that we standing with a begging hand almost, né? So what is the role of the African Union in all of this? Because the European Union, IMF, the World Bank, and all of that, so much power, and they come in the name of aid, and then we give up so much, and still we're doing it, you know? And I just have so many questions around, why is it allowed? So that is my question. Thank you.
I think it speaks to also the assertive position of the African Union. I mean, people have criticized the African Union for so long in terms of, even currently, a lot of the funding is very much, it comes from a lot of foreign institutions. So you then question, how much control does the African Union have? Who's deciding on a lot of things? For example, the Peace and Security Department is funded by the Norwegian government. So they're influencing a lot of the stuff that is happening there. So it's also power structure, who really has power, who's financing it, and follow the money. The money really speaks within the African Union. Yes.
This is a bit weird. A decolonial Pan-African South Africa, to me, looks like a self-empowered Africa, independent and functioning on a circular economy in which we focus on the people and the planet and not on the profits.
Clip.
From my side, it talks about the IMF. We don't have anybody that controls us in Africa in the way we must. But every time they fight us, they will always put us in the junk status. And then from their side, even if they are doing very bad, their economy is always up there. So we must start there and correct it. Thanks.
Absolutely. Assertive position in those institutions.
Where's the mic?
Two more hands.
My name is Kosnat again. I want to say a decolonial Pan-African just transition for me would look like a transition that will prioritize firstly the already existing challenges that are faced by most Africans, in particular in South Africa, and also speaks of the sovereignty of Africans and how to best do we ensure that anything that we do within the transition is at the benefit of all the people of Africa more than prioritize profit.
Thank you so much. On my side, it will be an approach that have to do with reclaiming African identity. You know, that will also speak to the philosophies that we used to practice back in the past. Yeah, so it's just about the approach that have to do with African countries or us as African continent reclaiming African identity, because it's lost and it's so much painful to see the way Africa is being exploited. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, just a glimpse of addition. Maybe we can take example from what is happening currently in Burkina Faso with the guy in the name of, I think, Ibrahim Traore. That should lead us somewhere. Thank you.
I agree. I'm out of time. I'm out of time.
I'll just briefly say that we do need revolution. Like, the reality is that with the vast majority of the heads of state, including certainly South Africa and governments, are very tied by millions of purse strings to international capital, as individuals, as a class, and we need revolutions and governments that represent the working class in Africa and the masses. I mean, if we've got those governments in the countries, then we can really come together. Because the big problem is actually at the starting block, the leadership in most countries represents an elite that's highly dependent on the West, which is the reason for this kind of begging approach. So we really need revolutions and to kick out the current ruling class in all of our countries.
The question I have for you guys is, how do we then achieve that? And I'm out of time, unfortunately.
For me, it will be nice seeing us taking more social ownership in doing for ourselves rather than relying on others to do for us.
They're going to hit me, sorry.
Big round of applause for Karabo. Thank you so much. I hope you guys know we got a lot of conversations ahead of us. So this is a primer. Those questions, we're not saying we've answered them yet. We're still working on them. And the question of social ownership is the next one we're diving into after lunch. So this is also about, like, how do we build these solutions to the questions that we're asking. But it is lunchtime now, and we can't run a revolution on an empty stomach. So we've got an hour. So if we can try get back here at, well, not try, 1:30, if we want to stay timely. And then we'll start diving into questions of social ownership. So thank you so much, comrades. Have a good lunch. The lunch today, I believe, is not at the carvery, but is actually down on the ground floor in the... what's the name of that place? It's the Royal Hall or something like that. So it's the bigger place downstairs, just because we're all going there at once and the carvery is quite small. So that allows us to all eat together downstairs. So you go down, you go past reception, and then it's just on your left. Yeah. There's a hand here.
So does it mean we can leave our laptop there safe? You will lock?
I would suggest bringing laptops with just in case. So yeah, maybe just bring valuables. We don't want to take unnecessary risks. And yeah, have a wonderful lunch, comrades. Yeah.